We're on the cloud. Okay. Okay. It's nice to see everyone.
So you let me know when you want me to do my thing, and
I guess
Well, I am just going to enjoy the reading. I'm just doing closing remarks, and I will try to keep an eye out for security.
okay. So
Okay.
should we start at 7:05?
I'm the only lesbian in the group, so I will do security. Oh, wait, I'm not.
You're not.
No, you're not. No, you're not. No.
Please accept my apologies. My
Unless
sisters.
something changed that I don't know about. But...
These my sisters. Didn't you know you've been excommunicated? No, I'm just kidding. I don't know why I said that. I'm following my friend Tom Cahill's advice. He said, when you think you've gone too far, go further. So I just keep digging
Oh.
deeper.
Do you guys have any rules about anything, in terms of muting and unmuting and all that stuff?
generally, we ask you to be muted unless you are reading or asking a question or anything like that. And I'll post the info that was sent in the chat so that you can see people's contact info and short bios.
Very good.
Hey,
We're just about a minute from start. Well, there we go. It's 7:05. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the West East Poets of the Pandemic and Beyond for another amazing edition of our program. I'm your opening co-host for tonight, Sandy Yannone. Also joining me are co-hosts Susana H. Case, Lynn McGee, and Carolyne Wright. Tonight we are so giddy, ecstatic, all the adjectives rolled into one, to be joined by the editor of From the Belly, Poets Respond to Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons, Volume 1, editor Karren Alenier. And with her tonight, we'll be hearing from Nils Michals, Susana H. Case, Brad Richard, and Carolyne Wright. I wanted to just give you a little taste of what's here in the anthology, a little information before I turn the program over to Karren. Don't go into the Steinian woods alone, is what Karren has said as she approached, enlisted, cajoled, probably did many things of wizardry to bring 36 poets together. They were ranging in experience and age from 19 to 90 in this first volume, as I mentioned, called From the Belly, Poets Respond to Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons, Volume 1. The volume is ripe with experiments in language, interpretations, and imaginative echoes of Stein's willful and whimsical disruptions. And I'm going to say eruptions as well. Disruptions and eruptions. And tonight, joining us to introduce and really be one of our guest co-hosts for the evening is Karren Lalonde Alenier. Karren Lalonde Alenier is the author of 8 volumes of poetry. The most recent is How We Hold On from Broadstone Books in 2021. Indeed, clap voluminously, of course. Gertrude Stein invents a jump early on is her jazz opera. I appreciate the versatility of artists immensely. Her jazz opera composed with composer Bill Banfield, and which premiered in New York by Encompass New Opera Theater in 2005. She has been a champion, a ventriloquist, I'm going to call a whisperer of Gertrude Stein's work for a number of years. And tonight's reading, I hope we'll be able to feature all 3 volumes on this program here. But tonight we'll be hearing some of the selections, again, from the belly. Poets Respond to Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons, Volume 1. Thank you so much, Karren, for being with us this evening. And I turn the program over to you.
Oh my, thank you so much for that enthusiastic and wonderful introduction. So far, I must say that is the best introduction that this book has had. So I can't wait to play and replay that on the new video for this particular program. So this book, From the Belly, Poets Respond to Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons, is a 3-book project based on the 3 sections of Tender Buttons: objects, food, and rooms. Volume 1, which is this book, which you have kindly already seen, is has the art by Grace Cavallari, who is a poet also featured in the book, our Maryland Poet Laureate. And the responses from tonight's 5 readers includes me as part of this showcase. I will read Stein's Tender Buttons poem for each of the responding poets, which will help distinguish Stein from the responding poet. I've asked each reader to start with a sound bite of their bio and a signature poem, one that is a particular favorite possibly of theirs, if not signature. And that way you'll learn something more about these wonderful poets, some of whom you know quite well because they're part of this series. To conclude the individual readings, I've also asked the poet to say something about their process in writing these response poems. So here goes. I am Karren Lalonde Alenier of Chevy Chase, Maryland, the first poet published by the WordWorks in 1975. And in 2023, I am the editor of From the Belly, Poets Respond to Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons. My signature poem is Leo on Seesaw, and this was part of the opera by Encompass New Opera Theater, but it sounded very different than this. Leo on Seesaw for the pleasure of Gertrude Stein. Little Buddha, little Bruder, kleine Bruder, tiny brother, bitty bother, sitting baldly in the butter, in the batter, shaking philosophic digits in the kitchen, for the Küchen has been eaten by the kitten, wearing mittens in the winter, hiding splinters in his fingers, finding spiders in the cracks of the plaster, so we laugh, 20 ha 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 ha, in metered breathing, something close to the day he was born. So, the Tender Buttons poem that I have responded to is called Nothing Elegant by Gertrude Stein. A charm. A single charm is doubtful. If the red is rose and there is a gate surrounding it, if inside is let in and their places change, then certainly something is upright. It is earnest. And so here is my response about the word. The pen is an organ, flaccid or sound, muscular music flowing milk or ink. Horace said, pen is tongue of mind. Who needs articles? Point is, pen is maker of kind teacher, teaching us right. Regarding my process, nothing elegant with the phrases, if the red is rose, a gate surrounding it, if inside is let in, and certainly something is upright, all suggest a sexual situation. Even earnest seems coded to maybe earn access to the nest. What is the nest? Where is the nest? A slip of the tongue, a slip of the writer's pen. Right you are, Gertrude, to teach us. And oh, by the way, did I say Gertrude Stein considered herself a male persona and her sexual organ was her pen? Right. Now, from the West Coast comes Nils Michals, our next poet responding to Tender Buttons objects.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here. I'm Nils Michals of Santa Cruz, California, out here on the left coast. And I'm the author of 4 collections, Lure, Come Down to Earth, of course, Gembox, which was the winner of the World WordWorks Washington Prize in 2018, and then a chapbook called Room, which came out from a wonderful little letterpress called Sting and Honey. I highly recommend their series of just beautifully put together books. I want to start with, I'm going to call it a signature poem only because I've taken a break from writing for a little bit, and I've been really researching and working toward a collection of poems that is inspired by the story of Abelard and Eloise, and the 12th century sort of star-crossed lovers. But I've kind of brought them into contemporary situations. So I've got a lot of ideas for this text, but I'm excited to kind of take on these personas and see where they go. So this is called Abelard Takes a Gap Year. The woman could not take another day of the monk on the couch in his threadbare robe, eating cool ranch Doritos and watching reruns of Sally, Jesse, Raphael. Why don't you get a job, said the woman. At least get a haircut. To which he replied, closer to God, and just shrugged. How does one reason with arguably the preeminent teacher and thinker of the medieval period? I like those red glasses, he'd often say to no one in particular. At least he'd stopped making those weird hand signs in air, except when the child who thought they were hilarious was around. She'd gone viral after dropping them into her hip-hop crew's TikTok routine, and now everyone knew the sequence. Baby swipe, blessing hand, baby swipe. Increasingly, however, Abelard seemed far removed in his thoughts, couldn't care less about the little pets and groupies who daily came knocking. Anything to do with love or sex, and dark clouds assembled at his brow, as when upon receipt of a dozen long-stemmed roses from that big-time nun, as he referred to her, he simply muttered, "This is Earth's darkest hour." The man wondered aloud to the woman during some pillow talk what it would be like to lose one's penis, and in that way, and whether the man, if it happened to him, could, as Abelard had, separate the trauma of the act from the representation of it. The man wasn't sure if he felt sorry for the monk, but naturally did for the discarded organ, probably tossed somewhere along the road and left to sink into dust. By then, the woman's breathing had a distance in it, and she had long fallen to sleep, which the man had learned was something that often happens to women when men continue to talk about their penises. So Karren, I think you're going to read A Chair.
I am. A Chair by Gertrude Stein. A widow in a wise veil and more garments shows that shadows are even. If addresses no more, it shadows the stage and learning. A regular arrangement, the severest and the most preserved is that which has the arrangement not more than always authorized. A suitable establishment, well housed, practical, patient, and staring, a suitable bedding, very suitable, and not more particularly than complaining. Anything suitable is so necessary. A fact is that when the direction is just like that, no more, longer, sudden, and at the same time, not any sofa, the main action is that without a blaming, there is no custody. Practice measurement. Practice the sign that means that really means a necessary betrayal in showing that there is wearing. Hope. What is a spectacle? A spectacle is the resemblance between the circular side place and nothing else, nothing else. To choose it is ended. It is actual, and more than that, it certainly has the same treat and a seat, all that is practiced, and more easily, much more easily, ordinarily. Pick a barn, a whole barn, and bends more slender accents than have ever been necessary. Shine in the darkness necessarily, actually not aching. A stubborn bloom is so artificial, and even more than that, it is a spectacle. It is a blinding accident. It is animosity and accentuation. If the chance to dirt diminishing is necessary, it is why is there no complexion? Why is there no rubbing? Why is there no special protection?
Thank you, Karren. And this is my response. It's called The Entire Text is a Field. A gleaning after a harvest of any kind is that which lays bare the labor and the luck. Almanacs fail us. Medical celebrities fail us. Cruise lines, surfaces, cheap screws too. Have you heard the one about the plowman and the weather? His blood pressure kept matching the airs until, like fragrant smoke leaving a thurible, poof, he was suddenly in everyone's clothes. So pick a field, a whole field, and observe the precise degree at which the heaviest sustenance hangs. Someone I know decided upon poppies, an endless distance of them, heavy-lidded on their own product. Of course, you must also select a chair, any chair, and put it in that field. I placed a lazy boy in an acre of cane, late summer, all those sweet bodies going gold in the setting sun, laid back and saw sky, a graffiti blue being scissored by the contrail of a G6, a single attendant with a moment dreaming down. A chair says it's not a table by suddenly deciding to go vertical. A field says, I can be anything I damn well please. Pablo's a genius or an incorrigible asshole drawing another hand for Alice to needlepoint the shit out of, stunningly, exquisitely, so selflessly into a Louis XV chair that everyone is certain they now know what tenderness is. Everyone is alive and asking for answers. So many voices at once, comprised wholly of the hollows of throats. To be everywhere, to be nowhere, to be where there is no there. But why so many choose a cordoned off chair in some museum's quiet air in its inoffensive light is a mystery. No one's sitting in that chair, nor permitted to. A terrible shame, given its form was made to bear the weight of us. So my process with this one was really interesting. I'm a Stein fan, but I have never really done a deep dive. And I really became fascinated with Alistocles. And what really moved me were these two chairs that Alistocles needle pointed based off of some drawings by Pablo Picasso, and kind of the dynamics between them and the story between them. So these sort of these beautiful chairs where there's this, as many commenters have sort of pointed out, this lovely intersection between sort of domesticity and art. The other idea that really, I think, most helped me understand the shape of this poem was, quote, something that's often sort of restated by the critic Judy Grahn, who kind of talked about Stein envisioning the entire text as a field. That's where the title comes. The entire text is a field in which every element matters as much as any other. And so I really wanted this sort of like, well, first of all, the poem is in a box shape. So there's really the whole design is not to really put any sort of extra emphasis on any one word or another. And I just kind of like this idea of sort of an equality between the words, and then also to kind of play off of the literal idea of being in a field, which, whose ubiquity just seems to go on and on and on if you kind of just stood in front of a grain field. So those were kind of the driving, I think, processes for how I thought about this poem. But I just want to say thank you, because this was a really fun exercise for me. And I just really enjoy being part of this anthology. Thank you. Oh, our next reader is Susana Case. She's our next poet responding to Tender Buttons Objects.
Thank you very much. And I agree, this was a very fun exercise for me too. I'm Susana Case of New York City and the author of 9 books of poetry. Most recently, If This Isn't Love, just out last month from Broadstone Books. This is what it looks like. So for my signature poem, I'm going to read a poem from If This Isn't Love. And the reason I chose this poem, which is titled Cocktail, is because in my response to the Stein poem, I also referenced cocktails. So to me, they were kind of connected in a sense. So this is Cocktail. If someone brings a gin and tonic and forgets the gin, what is the melody of the missing? Absence assails us with the loudest din, even when our ears bolt their doors to the clamor. Wind rattles leaves, ice clinks its restorative song. Ah, Juniper, we need the sweet to mask the harsh, my silly synesthesia. I'm mixing up sound and taste again. The jolt of you, sugary, fiercely singing lines I try to bury. I don't want to listen to someone I can't touch, you, thundering on and on about love in another thicket, in another country. I responded to Table, which Karren is now going to read.
A Table by Gertrude Stein. A table means, does it not, my dear? It means a whole steadiness. It is likely that a change, A table means more than a glass. Even a looking glass is tall. A table means necessary places and a revision of a little thing. It does mean that there has been a stand where it did shake.
And this is progressively smaller dimensions. You ruined our table with a sloppy cocktail, tried to ruin me with alcohol's sloppy love. I was already ruined at 13 by an older boy I'd never love, should have known better, shouldn't have drunk those cocktails, but I was unstable even then, and they turned me to stone. As girls, we liked screwdrivers, nasty drinks, overly orange, the non-taste of vodka, ruins for boys priming us for screwing with their unbreakable adolescent cocks, a table of Picasso fractals, the destined design of repeatable patterns. Look, our table wobbles, and you drink too many martinis. That part is unshakable. Nevertheless, I love you. My love's all very irregular. So I write a lot about love relationships. And so that's where I was going to go with Stein's poem. And the table was, an interesting prompt for me, a sort of metaphor. I wanted to play with Stein's use of repetitions, and that is how ruined and ruin, R-U-N-E, got used in this poem. And I also wanted to play off her mention of steadiness. So my table wobbles and is irregular. And when she wrote about shake, it inspired the cocktail references. I don't want you to think I'm a lush who writes only about cocktails, having just read 2 cocktail poems, but it was a natural association for me, and the and was the reason why I used the word unshakable in the poem. It was a kind of pun with the martini. So that's where that's how I got to this. So now the next reader from the West Coast, Carolyne Wright, will respond to Tender Buttons Objects.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really pleased and honored to be here. Thanks for introducing me, Susana. Thanks very much, Karren, for assembling this volume and putting us all in it. And it's a lot of fun to be here. I'm going to read a signature poem. It's kind of a, I guess you can call it a signature poem. It's probably more of a kind of a, not a signature, but a sort of a not exactly an obscene, but maybe an X-rated scrawl. Well, might be a better definition. It's a poem from my most, I was supposed to read my little bio. I'm sorry. I'm Carolyne Wright of Seattle, Washington. I have published 18 books and anthologies of poetry, essays, and translation. And my latest books are Masquerade, a memoir in poetry, which came out in 2021 from Lost Horse Press, and This Dream the World, New and Selected Poems, also from Lost Horse, 2017. So as I was saying, my kind of sloppy scrawl signature of a poem is from Masquerade, and here's again the cover, which is sort of like, how shall I say this? Mardi Gras meets Fillmore West. If you remember those wonderful Fillmore West posters from the 60s. In any case, most of this book, it's a memoir in poetry. It has to do with a relationship between 2 people in the arts, poets and artists. He is African-American, she is white, and they have a very interesting multivalent relationship. with interesting sorts of conflicts about art and about many other things. But there's also a series of poems in here called Endecasyllabics about the women. And so, you know, we had a group of friends. We were living in New Orleans, and we had a group of friends around us, you know, who came and went. And one of them was not really a friend, but it was the infamous kind of street character. New Orleans, of course, has always had a number of interesting characters. And one of them was Ruthie the Duck Lady. And there she is. There's a postcard of Ruthie the Duck Lady taken back in the day with her floppy hat on, her Santa Fe skirt, her roller skates. There she is with her roller skates, and in her hand holding an adolescent fuzzy duck. She was always followed by a small flock of ducks, which was why she was called Ruthie the Duck Lady. And I used to see her around all over New Orleans. There were all kinds of crazy stories about her. So I decided that she needed to be part of the book. And I had also had a very interesting attempt at having a real, you know, meaningful conversation with her at one point. But you'll see how that went, okay? Endecasyllabics. Oh, and that's the other thing. Endecasyllabics means written in 11 syllables. So there's 11 syllables per line. And the epigraph for this poem, which is called Endecasyllabics about the women, Ruthie, the epigraph is from a photographer of Ruthie, whose real name was Ruth Grace Moulon, born in 1934, passed in 2001. And this photographer, David Richmond, said about Ruthie, she's not out of touch with reality. She's just not interested. Well, I want to talk with Ruthie, discover who is this woman inside the Duck Lady facade, the roller skates, thrift shop wedding gown and veil, the fuzzy ducklings that parade behind her through the quarters on Mardi Gras, rumors of burly blue uniformed police watching over her, asleep on Jackson Square park benches. I find her in a nameless bar on Dauphine Street, plucking at her torn voile skirt and runs in her pilled cotton stockings. She glares when I ask to take her photo. That'll be $1. Her drawl is steely, her outstretched fingers ending in carmine painted claws. I falter before her scowl, her desiccated voice, her figure perched on a broken back chair, tough as a folded bird. I hand over the $1, aim and focus. She sits up straight, grin grimaces for the flash. Then she nods, turns back to her glass with its Jack's Brewery logo. My deeper questions? They never had a chance. So that's Ruthie. Okay, so the poem of Gertrude Stein's, to which I was responding, is called Suppose an Eyes, as in eyes. So Karren, I'm looking forward to hearing you read it.
Suppose an Eyes by Gertrude Stein. Suppose it is within a gate which is open at the hour of closing, summer, that is to say, it is so. All the seats are needing blackening. A white dress is in sign. A real soldier has worn lace, a worn lace of different sizes. That is to say, if he can read. If he can read, he is a size to show shutting up 24. Go red, laugh white. Suppose a collapse in rubbed purr. In rubbed purr get. Little sales ladies, little saddles of mutton. Little sales of leather and such beautiful, 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 beautiful.
All right, thanks, Karren. Thank you, Gertrude. And my poem in response is called Suppose. Afghanistan, August 2021. Suppose it was us within that panicked throng outside the gate. Suppose mouths open clamoring for mercy at the hour of closing. Suppose the airport closing down the summer. Suppose the summer closing down, seats on the aircraft collapsing. Say which women are closing down. Say which women wear blackening as a sign. Which women's white dresses, which hijabs of worn lace, which women's white lace blackened among soldiers outside the closing gates. Suppose the different sizes of the crowd, suppose a collapse rubbed pure. Say which soldiers read the signs, the different sizes of signs, which signs shutting down the airport. Suppose women in white dresses read the signs, their black head coverings. Say which soldiers read the signs, which ones cannot read the signs. Which generals or presidents ever read the signs. Say which sails have saddled us, which leather saddles are so beautiful they must be blackened. Suppose the flags, red, green, blackening the whole show closing down. Suppose women outside the gates at the hour of shutting down. Suppose the collapse of a country. Well, I was clearly taking a lot of the elements, the words and the phrasing from Gertrude's Suppose and Eyes. But I was also, it was the time when the conflict, as it was called, in Afghanistan was closing down. And President Biden had been left this war to finish, and only one airport had been left open. All the others had been closed by the previous guy, which made evacuating all of the American forces and American equipment and all of the Afghanis who needed to leave the country also because they had worked for the Americans and were thus in danger. So all of that, all of the imagery from that I had seen on television was just occupying my attention. And so I was taking elements from the Gertrude Stein Suppose and Eyes. There was a gate that was open, and then the closing summer, and then the blackening, and the white dress, and the soldier, and the lace, and all of these elements, and then the collapse. So I found so much of that language very resonant and related, just it seemed to relate very closely to this tragedy unfolding in real time, half the world away. And I found myself using a litany form, repetition with variation, the suppose, the suppose, the suppose, and then the other phrase that she used, which was say, say which. And so I was very drawn to that. And I love this kind of assignment, because I would never have written this poem, which is really a protest about these sorts of, terrible human rights tragedies, unless I had been given this assignment to respond to this particular poem. And it's wonderful to be given such an assignment. It's wonderful to give such assignments to oneself, but it's wonderful when they come from another source. So thank you very much, Karren, and thank you very much, Gertrude Stein. And the next poet reading is going to be Brad Richards. Let me see here what we have. Yes, here we go. I'm going through I'm not scrolled down here. Yes. And so Brad from the Southern Coast, he is going to be our last poet responding to Tender Buttons Objects. So take it away, Brad.
Thank you, Caroline. It was so great to hear you read. It's so great to
you.
be here tonight with all of you. This is just wonderful. Thank you, Karen, and everyone. So before I get into my stuff, I do want to mention that Caroline was this year's judge for the Hillary Tom Capital Collection competition and did a wonderful job. It's been great working with you. Thank you so much for all you did. I know we put you through your paces there at the end. And I should mention also that I live in New Orleans and I grew up here, and my husband is a documentary filmmaker, an editor, and one of his earliest projects was a documentary on Ruthie.
Whoa, I must see this. I must see this. Oh, what a wonderful confluence. This is great.
The crazy thing is, it's so old. I think it only exists on VHS, but I can see if I can find a link. And I remember Ruthie all too well. I'm Brad Richard of New Orleans. I'm author of, among other books, Parasite Kingdom, winner of the 2018 10th Gate Prize from the WordWorks. And my next book is Turned Earth, forthcoming from LSU in 2025. I can say that now that I've signed the contract. And for my signature poem, I'm going to read one from Parasite Kingdom. It's called Love Song. It's a couple of pages. I'm going to read the whole thing. It goes pretty quickly. And I think it follows pretty interestingly after Carolyn's response to Stein. Love Song. Forgive me, I thought I was dead. Your flag draped over my face, dolls across my lap. I want to leave. I want to thrash out from under the swelling crest of the dollar before its undertow swallows us like a snack. I'm going to eat your heart like a snack. You're going to eat my heart before this undertow swallows us. Swollen crest of the dollar, I want to thrash out from under the dolls on our laps. I want to leave no flag draped over our faces. Forgive me, I thought I was dead. Thank you, I'm finished. If you care, then rinse the soot from my mouth. Here's $1. Let me know if the future left a message I can swallow. The newscaster tells me the story of our lives before I can check the ballot. Before I can check the ballot, before I can check, the ballot tells me the story of our lives. I can swallow the newscaster. If the future left a message, here's $1. Let me know, then rinse the soot from my mouth. Thank you. I'm finished, if you care. Forgive me. How little it took to legislate assent, the way the gods make themselves appear natural. I love the way you masturbate. You make a ring of nudes in a meadow feel lonely. The long night comes when you have no one left to talk to. When you have no one left to talk to, the long night comes. Feel lonely? You make a ring of nudes in a meadow, yours. I love the way you masturbate, make themselves appear natural to legislate assent this way. God, forgive me, how little it took. Forbidden, we wipe ourselves away. What difference does it make? Like any liar, you know the trick. Fuck you, just aim. It only leads to more fire. If beyond the fire there's a door, here's $1. There is no dollar. If beyond the fire there's a door, but it only leads to more fire. Fuck you, just aim. I like a liar. I know your tricks. What difference does it make? I forbid you to wipe yourself away. Thank you. And Karen asked me to respond to the amazing It Was Black, Black Took.
It was Black, Black Took by Gertrude Stein. Black ink, best, wheel, bale, brown. Excellent, excellent, not a whole house, not a pea soup, no bill, no care, no precise, no past pearl, goat.
Thank you. And this is a pantoum called Blackened Was. Blackened was it past or future now? Whose care isn't it? Whose pearl? Penned ultimate day. Whose hello will the day house? Whose care isn't it? Whose pearl? Whose shell we make of today? Whose hello will the day house? Nothing comes of this climate. What shall we make of today? Hold pearls or bull's husk. Nothing comes of this climate. Sea's surface sees oily clouds. Hulled pearls or bull's husk, a goat goes on, up and gone. Sea's surface sees oily clouds. How shall and wheel it reel? A goat goes on and gone. Hope band herein turn. How shall and wheel it reel? What years in rhyme forget? Hope band herein turn. No pea soup, no bill, no care. What years in rhyme forget? My sallow eye sails a spark. No pea soup, no bill, no care. Penned ultimate day. My sallow eye sails a spark. Blackened past, future, now. Thank you. So I'm going to go half ad lib here and half from prepared notes. First of all, it was just catnip to give me a Gertrude Stein writing prompt. I love Stein so much. And I remember my first deep encounter with Tinder Buttons being when I forced myself to teach it so I could finally really engage with it, as I'm sure has been the case for many of us. And I felt like I understood from doing that I felt like Stein was using language more as a plastic medium than the way we usually use it. And that is both liberating and it's really demanding, because language is then no longer confined to making meaning in conventional ways, but it must make things, the way a sculptor shapes stone or a painter paints shapes. Stein's reader may expect meaning, but is offered things that only exist in those pages. I find a joyful tension in that relationship between meaning and thing, or between expected and unexpected function. The pantoum seemed like a natural form for exploring those tensions, including the tension between expected and unexpected. So I borrowed some words and sounds from It Was Black, Black Took, and let the pantoum take me where it would, as it did, and here we are. Thank you.
And I must say, there is there. And I want to just talk a minute about there, because, and I'll tell you why, it's there versus this, but Gertrude Stein went to Oakland during her 1934-35 lecture tour to see her house where she grew up for most of her life. And it was torn down, and there was no there there. And so everybody walks around saying there's no there there, and they have no idea it's Gertrude Stein. But we all know that. So there's that. Okay, now the origin of this project came from ModPo, the Modern and American Contemporary Poetry course that Al Fielreese teaches every year. This is like his 12th year. And he is doing it online through Coursera. And he has I would say, a cult following. There are thousands of people all over the world who speak English in some degree, and they all come to hear poetry and to participate in this poetry and to talk to each other. And so I started looking at Tender Buttons online in his forums so that people could discuss it. And that's the origin. And I started writing poems in response to the Tender Buttons. So that's how I came to this project. Then I thought to myself, I keep telling people, don't go into the Steinian woods alone, which is where we came into this reading, because that is something that I believe very profoundly. If you want to have fun with this, you need a whole circle of friends to help you enjoy how wonderful this is. And tonight really proves that. Thank you, each one of you, and it's so amazing. The way the reading came together, had to do with who was on one coast and who was on the other coast. And, pulling that together and keeping it very limited to only, a few people. But the poems talk to each other here tonight. They are so amazing. You have the table and the chair, and you have, the eyes, and you have the took. What is the took? I'm not sure that I know what the took is, but we have it. We do have whatever it is. So Brad has really made that more clear with his objects. So I think we had a very amazing coming together tonight. This reading has been exceptionally interesting to me. And the last reading that this group, I'm talking about, the group in this book did, was at the Arts Club of Washington, D.C. I organized it. I made a script. And guess what? I wasn't there. There was no me there. And the reason was because I had COVID, so I was at home and there was no Zoom. And so I just had to rely on the people who were there to do whatever. So, this book has a life of its own. So anyway, if there's any questions that I can answer, I'd be pleased to tackle them. And if there's anybody in this group who wants to say something in addition to what I've said, that's fine too.
Oh, I just want to thank you again and say this is a really inspiring thing to do, to bring together a number of poets and have them all respond to different texts. And recently, I'm in this course sponsored by the Community of Writers, which used to be called Squaw Valley, but they got rid of that rather, disrespectful name. And it's on the poetry and prose of C.D. Wright, who, I often have been confused with C.D. Wright. And I found a lot of qualities in her work, which I'd been reading for years anyway, but there's a certain kind of that sort of open field quality in her work as well, that does the same kind of thing to me as Gertrude Stein does. I think, a different sort of voice, but it has that kind of freedom to experiment and to try out all kinds of things and to welcome in a lot of different elements. So, this is great. And I just love hearing everybody else's responses to this work by Gertrude Stein. So, yeah.
And I wanted to say the dimensions were really interesting, because you have Nils with his dimensions, and you have Susana with her dimensions. And so, there's a lot of measurement going on in Stein.
Right.
And so lots of ways of having fun with this work.
For me, it was very interesting to get the assignment of a specific poem, because I'm not sure I would have arrived. Someone else, and now I can't remember who, said he or she would never have written their poem otherwise. And that's kind of the way I feel. If I'd had to if I was asked just to send a poem about something inspired by Gertrude Stein, I'm not sure I necessarily would have come up with anything, but having it really, and I never write hardly ever write to prompts, don't like to write to prompts, but this one was challenging, and I was happy with what came out of it, and it's a very interesting experience for me.
I just wanted to say, as many of us are former teachers or teachers now, and I think that the writing a poem prompted by another poet's poem is such an excellent way to understand that poet's work. And I think Gertrude Stein in particular is a poet that you can't really look directly at her work in order to understand it. You kind of have to, I think, by emulating it or just responding to it or just going on pure intuition. I think you're best off just going on intuition. And I think that feels to me like what these responses, they feel intuitive to me. They don't feel, I don't know, but I just think that's an excellent way to, and I was wondering if anyone had anything to say about what they understand about the work of Gertrude Stein that they didn't understand before.
Oh, well, go ahead, Brad. Yeah, I've spoken.
I'll just say something that really struck me was that this is kind of, it's almost an ekphrastic activity that we're engaged in here. Except it's so odd that we're, the art object is a piece of writing. But listening to everyone's responses, it really felt like an ekphrastic activity, because I was so amazed hearing how people were bringing out very personal responses. I went straight toward the, heady, abstract kind of thing, but like Susana's and Carolyn's especially just really struck, like I was very moved by what you both read, and it was unexpected. So I guess, Lynn, that doesn't exactly answer your question, but it helped me understand Gertrude Stein's work in the world a little differently, hearing those pieces.
What do you mean when you say in the world?
Like hearing other people responding to it this way with their own words, responding directly to her work, and the way that they brought our world to Stein's work, I thought was really fascinating. So,
I mean, Stein strikes me as literally a timeless writer. And of course, historically, she was not as well received as she could have been in her own time. I mean, there's so much lore. I've read many biographies and critical books on Stein and her work. And when I was in graduate school at the University of Nebraska, in fact, one of my friends who is a flash fiction writer, there was a group of us that she had written kind of a play called Very Hungry, a play in 8 acts, and 8 of us got together and we did this one time only reading from this play in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I had forgotten all about it. And I've got the script somewhere here in all my papers here. But my question is very similar to Lynn's, was in hearing your signature poem and then the Stein poem, and then your response was exactly that. Like, what surprised you as you were listening and trying to respond to Stein? What did you learn about Stein, but what did you learn about yourself as a poet? Because while I heard the attempt at synergy, there was tension between Stein and each of you as the poet to grapple with how were you going to enter this conversation, or was it going to be a conversation? And I'm just really curious about and so your voices, oh, each of your poems were stunning. They really, truly were stunning. It clearly, the prompt brought out something quite stellar in each of you. And yet it's not necessarily what is in your own signature stellar poems. So I'm really curious as to, did you see that for yourself, and what was the thing that you were able to see? If that makes any sense, what I've said at all.
I wonder if we can hear from Nils. I know you see you're in the car driving somewhere, but maybe you can still talk. I don't know. We don't want you to have any bumper cars there.
Yeah, whoa.
I just got kicked out of my public library.
Oh,
Yeah, I live in the mountains, and the Wi-Fi is well, it leaves something to be desired. So I decided to not not mess this one up by going down to the library. But that is such a wonderful question, and I think that the way that I think about Stein is really in sort of two different pieces of my life. I remember encountering Stein as an undergraduate at Santa Cruz when I was first getting into poetry, and I remember being extremely dismissive. Like, I don't like this. This is not up my alley. I don't know if I want to call this poetry. And it was just when you're an undergraduate and you're just like starting to get into it, it's just you suddenly are like the world's worst critic. You're just like dismissive of people, and like and so I think that my relationship to Stein over time has really been sort of, again, a tale of two different time periods, and I came back to Stein as I became more interested in modernist writers, and really came, what really triggered Gembox, for example, was going back and reading Tender Buttons and just being like, what the hell have I been missing all of this time? And so for me, it was this moment, this aha moment, where I felt like I really couldn't understand Stein until I had kind of lived my life, right? Until I'd kind of seen the absurdity of my own sort of humanness, that I had sort of developed a sort of a time period with the world and the things of the world and the materials of the world. And I just really came back and to Tender Buttons, just really with this. I mean, that's exactly what the title is. It's just sort of this beautiful care for objects and the world around us. And the other thing is, it's so sonically gorgeous. Like, it's just, I never really appreciated Stein as sort of a technician in that way. And so for me, coming back and I think spending more time with a chair, I was immediately struck by the music in there, but also just the sort of studied meditation on the object itself. And that's not something I tend to do a lot in my poetry. So to sit down, and I sat in a chair for a long time, and I sat in a lot of different chairs. and I was like, what is this doing to my body? How is my body present in this space? And for me, it was, again, just kind of an aha moment. I think I have a lot more to encounter with Stein. I haven't read enough is essentially what I would say to that. But it certainly unlocked a kind of care, a subtle care for the world around me. And I don't know, I really love this assignment. I would have never given it to myself, and I'm really happy.
well, I'm pleased that I was able to connect with so many people. And I did have to convince a few people that they said, well, I don't know anything about Stein. I said, you don't have to know anything about Stein. You just have to respond to this poem and be honest, and authentic with your response. That's all you have to do. And I know you can do it, because otherwise I wouldn't be talking to you. And and so that's how I did that. It was important to me you know, to connect with people and to bring them in, and also to connect with people who weren't necessarily at the top of the ladder. And I want to acknowledge Margie Ross, who's in the audience here tonight. And she had been a ModPo student, let's say, and she's part of a reading group that I belong to for poetry. And you know, she has published poems, but she isn't practicing like most of us, you know, with lots of books and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to have it equalized across everybody. This is because Stein is the people's poet. She said so, and I believed it.
Yeah, I love that it's so intergenerational, you know, again, 19 to 90, and just kind of echoing what Niall said, like, I felt about Stein when I first read Stein the same way I felt about Virginia Woolf. And and I remember reading To the Lighthouse for the first time in college and wanting to throw the book out the window. I was enraged. I was like, what the hell is this?
Right.
And it's just that I was stupid is what it was. Like, I just hadn't lived at all. I mean, I was 19 years old, not to take anything away from the 19-year-old who has responded in this collection, right? But so I can really relate to what you're saying so much about, you know, needing to, you know, be in the world in a way that you can actually appreciate what Stein's vision was, and how vast her visions were. I mean, how expansive they were and how beyond their time they were. That's why I say she's, you know, timeless, 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 timeless. So and I've been doing the book I'm working on now, it's coming out next year, is actually, it's a meditation on glass. My dad was a stained glass artist, and I did the work in his studio as a young person, but I didn't think anything of the object or what the object was doing. And to now spend time with an object that is so prismatic, and particularly poignantly for me after my father has recently passed away, has just been such a revelation. And so I saw the revelation in each of your responses, and I want to just thank Karren for your vision for doing this work. Boy, volume 1, I can't wait for volume 2 and volume 3.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I think if I had been introduced to Stein when I was 19, I probably would have felt somewhat the same way you did. I would have, what is this? This is just a bunch of words thrown at a page, you know, words and phrases. It's kind of like Jackson Pollock, you know, but in poetry, you know, kind of like action painting, action poetry. But you know, I can see the benefit of that now. We don't necessarily want poems that are carefully made objects, which of course is what we were raised with going to college in the late 60s, early 70s, and grad school, and everything was still sort of the post-World War II carefully made object. Poetry in form, and then free verse became the sort of the default style. But and certain rules, you know, applied to all of this, and we kind of absorbed them, internalized them all. And I think some of that judgmental quality that young people, I mean, young people meaning like late adolescence, early 20s, you can really get into this judgmental frame of mind, which I remember having. And I found some diaries of mine from like when I was in, you know, 13 and 14, and boy, was I judgmental. Whoa, I should write about it. But anyway, what I like about about Gertrude Stein now is, as Nils said, she's someone once you've lived a little bit, you can come to her and see, see realities there that you wouldn't have said before. And also, I just love the freedom of it, the expansiveness, the inclusivity of it, as others have said. And in a way, the kind of energy that I feel emanating from her work is the same energy I feel emanating from the Beats, Ginsberg and Kerouac and all those people, some of whom were rather, sexist in their ways, but the energy of their work and the way that it could encompass so much, and the freedom to respond to it in any way we want. I feel that this work gives us permission to write, just write, and we don't have to hold any prescribed rules. Although I do love the way you responded with a pantoum, because I love pantoums. But of course they also, the way that the paired lines have to repeat, those, even though it's a form, it permits of so many unexpected juxtapositions of words and lines, which is something that I see in Stein as well. All kinds of juxtapositions of words and phrases and objects, and it's great. It's very freeing and very inspiring. It gives me a lot of energy. Yeah.
I think the way that I was disposed to read poetry books when I was younger, and still often read poetry books this way, is to start at the beginning and read through to the end, and often in one sitting. And I don't think that that's useful here. I don't think that works in quite the same way. So I think one has to maybe just look at a bit at a time and sit with it. I can't imagine reading through from the start to the finish, in quite the same way as a more narrative poetry book.
It's good to have breath. You need to breathe with the work.
Yeah.
So yes, and each person who responded came at it from a different angle, so it's cubist in that fashion as well.
I wanted to ask that question of you, Karren, from what Susana just said. It suggested to me, how did you decide in terms of ordering these the contributions to the anthology? Does it follow, do you have the objects, and how did you put the Gertrude Stein pieces and then their responses from all these poets? How did you order them? What was your ordering?
Oh, very simple.
Yeah.
This is Gertrude Stein's order.
Oh, okay.
This is her order. I thought you might be asking me the question, how did I assign people the poems that they got? Well,
that's
that
another
was
good
random.
question. Yes.
That was random. What I did was I put everybody's name on a piece of paper. I cut out the names, and I cut out the titles of the texts, and I shook it up and I put them together, and that's how it went out.
That's wonderful.
I wanted it to be very, egalitarian, and that's the way it was. There was no, nobody got to pick, and I don't think anybody really asked for anything in particular, which was nice because I didn't have to deal with that.
That's great. That's a wonderful way to do it. I mean, it's very Steinian, an extremely Steinian way to do it. Yeah.
Yes, but the thing is, I didn't do that exactly with the second volume, and that is somebody who's in the second volume, as is Anne Woodworth. And the way I did that was very well, it wasn't really that different. It was just slightly different. So, for example, there is one very controversial poem in the second section, which is food. And in that, Stein uses the N word. And so I wanted that the person who responded to that particular poem, which is Dinner, to be somebody who was very spiritual, who, you know, had a lot of experience in the world. And as it turned out, I picked the right person because she had a lot of Shakespeare experience, and it was really a great match. So that I picked her. And then I thought to myself, well, there's something else that's different about this, is because the beginning poems are very long. Yeah, roast beef is like 6 pages in one of these, you know, little books that I'm, here we go. You know, so this is the book that I used as the, you know, there we go, sort of. Anyway,
Cooler text, right?
this is the Centennial edition that was corrected. He went through and looked at all of the versions. And so I got the, you know, the best version of everything. Anyway, it's like 6 pages in that book, roast beef. And so roast beef, I had responded to a number of those stanzas myself, but then I picked some other people who had already responded in volume 1. And then the rest, then so that was sort of a separate entity. And then I picked out a number of poems that I thought were really long and hard, and I picked certain people to be in that pile. And then the rest of the poems, it was more, you know, a random kind of thing. But I didn't pick the other poems, you know, there was some randomness still in the whole thing. So anyway, it's a really unusual thing. And then volume 3 will be very different too. So most people, when they start out with Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons, they start with objects and then they drop it because they don't know what to do next. They don't know how to make it different. They don't get what's going on, and they, you know, they lose their energy. But everybody here gave me energy, and I was able to go forward. And it's been a really exciting and illuminating journey. And I think we're running out of time tonight, so I think we had a lot of fun. We don't want to overdo this.
I wanted to ask one more question. The title, in this volume is called From the Belly. Are the second and third volumes going to have a different title, or are they going to be From the Belly, you know, more about From the Belly, like Marvin Bell's Dead Man? You know?
Yeah, it's going to be From the Belly. You know, poets respond to Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons, volume 2, Food, and then volume 3, Rooms. So yeah, people were wondering about that.
Yeah. This is great. This is great. Thank you so much for including us, and for you know, doing this reading featuring this wonderful, crazy anthology.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to invite everyone to keep us in mind for November. We have one poet lined up, and we'll be announcing who's reading in November. The series started in June 2020, and we've featured over 80 poets. In the spring of June 2020, because I was feeling very isolated, I asked my friend Susana Case in New York and my friend Bill Moore in Los Angeles to join me in creating a forum for poets from both coasts and beyond, so that we could exchange audience and learn about each other's groups of poems that they emanate from. And that's been a really important part of the series. I think that the poets that we each bring, this was an exceptional reading. It was about, for the book, but usually we each invite one poet that we've discovered. I usually bring poets that I have just discovered, but and we invariably learn about what's going on outside of our circles. And sometimes, we have poets who have read from England and Argentina and the Caribbean, and we're just, we try to open it as wide as possible. So it's been really interesting to hear your poems tonight, and we're on Facebook. You can friend us. So let me put the link for the reading, hold on a second. You just go to the I'm going to give you the link for the series itself. So you can, look through it and see if there are poets that maybe you didn't know, don't know, so.
And, yeah, and that is the website that has the authoritative list of all the previous readings as well as the videos, right, of all of the readings. Is that correct, Lynn?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it has,
great.
I would say more than 3/4 of the
Right.
videos are there. Susana has to like remind me over and over and over again to hyperlink to the videos, and I'll try to do that. So let me just actually stop the recording.
Did we mention the date of the November reading is the 12th, November 12th?
Thank you for mentioning that. Thank you.
Yeah, it has to be before Thanksgiving. But yeah, I think generally we try to do the third Sunday, but the third Sunday is too
And we
close
do the
to
second
Thanksgiving.
Sunday. We do the
We're
second
doing the
Sunday.
second. Oh, okay.
But how do you close the recording?
Um,
Got it. Just did it.
Okay.